Behind the smile, there was sadness and hurt and pain. I was going through separation and ultimately my divorce. I was working two jobs to take care of my daughters. But then God. God moved in the midst of a pandemic 5 years later, and I was able to purchase my first home. The year was 2015 when my life totally changed. And I want to share my testimony. That year, I knew that my marriage wasn't working, and I went on a fast. And then just before Lent was over, a lot of things were revealed that subsequently led to my separation and divorce. And that summer was very, very difficult. I was working two jobs to support my daughters. But before that, God's favor was still on me, even though my heart was breaking. I remember one day, unemployed, marriage was coming to an end. My daughters were in school, and I just crawled into the fetal position and was laying on my circular rug, and I said, I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I'm dying. And this still, strong, reassuring voice said, but you're not. It was God. So I got up and washed my face. And I'm not going to say, oh, that's when the tears miraculously stopped, because they flowed. But God began to move on my behalf. My mother's class leader at her church had told her that there was a job opening. Um, she was a real estate broker and never worked in real estate before. I took the position as doing marketing and also covering the front desk. And that actually subsequently led me to getting a lot of experience working with realtors and doing marketing and consulting for them later down the line. I also got a position working for, um, I hate it sounds crazy saying cousin-in-law, but basically my in-laws, my former husband's family. And they said, we don't agree with what went down. You're still family. And that support was great. So I was working two jobs, and one was with the city of Detroit for the Meet Up to Eat Up program. So I was working two jobs, taking care of my daughters as I was navigating this whole separation and divorce. And that summer, I remember just thinking how hard it was. And I remember talking to a really good friend of mine, and she said, we got to get you all out of that house. And so I noticed she was praying and interceding for me. And even before I bought my house, that was in 2015. By 2016, I was in another house um, in East Point, which is a suburb of Detroit. I rented a home for my daughters and I. So we started on the road to living our new normal. And my divorce was finalized at the end of 2017. And even during that time, other doors began to open. A friend of mine who I worked with, who actually we worked together, and then she ended up working for me at one point. We worked at a company together. Her husband had a contract with the state of Michigan, and he was telling her, there's a lot of opportunity here. She couldn't because of her job that she had. She just didn't have flexibility. And she was telling me about, this work with the state of Michigan with the Attorney General's office. So I was doing presentations on keeping kids safe, keeping seniors safe, and that was another opportunity. Then the job at the real estate company just stopped. Like, I was doing a presentation and the boss was like telling me, oh, Michelle's doing all these great things and I have these plans. And then it was like the next day I got let go. And there was no reason given. It was like, oh, well, in the state of Michigan, I don't have to give you a reason. I was like, okay, bet. I'm like, okay, God. I still had the other position, although it was seasonal. But then God began to prepare me and I started doing the contract work. Found out later on that the office manager found out how much I made and didn't like it. And so I guess it was a either her or me situation. And so that's why I was let go. But like I said, even with that, God was still moving. He was still moving. And then I started working for another company. It was a sales position, and I was there for a couple of years. During that time, I knew that it was time for me to purchase my home. Now, let me tell you something. When I was married, I honestly didn't know if that was getting a home was possible. We were told by a realtor, myself and my former husband, that you guys are not, you're not going to be able to get a house because of X, Y, and Z. And, we were like, okay. And I kind of settled in my mind that this was something that was unattainable for me. Thinking that my thinking was so limited just because this one person said that. Well, I didn't think I was going to be able to lease a home with a position that was a contractual position. It really wasn't contractual. I was a contractor for the state of Michigan. So I didn't have like a regular job. But again, favor found me and my daughters and I moved. We moved into a cute little ranch in East Point and we lived there for 4 years. And when it was time, my landlord was like, hey, if you want to renew again, you can, but the price is going to go up. And then I was looking at what I was paying for rent. I said, it's time. So that January, I was like, this is January 2020. And you all know what happened in 2020. So January 2020, I was told by one realtor, let's do it. But then March happened. And that's the world started shutting down because of the pandemic. But I still wanted a house. And I was told by the first realtor and a bank, well, right now people are not, no one's getting loans for houses. No one's getting a mortgage. It's just, it's just not feasible. It's not the right time. So I went online and I was asking a lot of questions. And this wonderful realtor, Tiffany Lewis, she kept answering my questions. And then I said, well, you should be my realtor. Because she was saying people are buying houses in the midst of this. Whoa. Technical difficulties. She said people are buying houses even in the midst of this pandemic. So we started the process. And what I also want to add is this is the same woman who years earlier had a home daycare and took care of not only both my girls, but also my nephew. And because she was following God's plan, not once, but twice, she made an incredible impact in my life and my family's life. Look her up, Tiffany Lewis, Keller Williams. And just seeing how God moved. So I got approved for my loan and we started looking for a house. And when I walked into the house that I'm in now, when I walked in, God said, this is it. And I only got into like the living room part. Hadn't gone through the dining room, kitchen, family room. This is it. So I knew that I knew. Subsequently got the house. Was going through the process. But then in May, I got laid off. Well, furloughed because they were having everybody work from home, but I did have a return date. I told my realtor, she said, I'm glad you told me. She spoke with the sellers, their agent. They said they were gonna wait. Mind you, they already had someone else who went through the process and they had a job loss and they ended up having to walk away from it because they had a job loss. They decided to wait. You can't tell me what God won't do. Subsequently, had a return date. But then they ended up letting me go anyway because they decided to do some restructuring. But I was already in my house by then. I also want to go back a couple of other times during, I want to say this was 2016. Um, the sister that does my taxes, Baskin Tax Service, it was one particularly rough year. And I was praying. I said, I really need to get my tax return back quickly. She told me in all her years, and we've talked about this in church, she's given the testimony in all her years, she's never seen anyone get their tax return that quick. And that's the power of prayer. So I want you to know, if you're going through heartache, whatever it is you're going through, God has got you. I was listening to that song Smile by Kirk Franklin, and I would be crying to work, but I'm telling you, hold on, things will get better. You will get better. And what I didn't know then was that hurt that I went through prepared me for the biggest loss of my life, was when I lost my father unexpectedly 2 years ago. I will speak about that in another video. But thanks for joining me on my journey. This is my first video in my 100 days, 100 videos on Empowered by Michelle. Take care and God bless.